The story is told from the perspective of a woman. I'm not going to tell you who I am, what my name is, or what I do for a living. None of that matters. What matters is what I went through just 2 days ago. I'm going to share only the things directly related to the nightmare I experienced. It's just me and my daughter. We don't live in luxury, but we get by. My husband drank a lot, and because of that, well, he's no longer with us. He passed recently, and actually this story is somewhat related to him. Well, sort of. But no, it's not exactly about him. Everything used to be normal. We were just an average family until things started to go downhill. John, my husband, began drinking. I'm not sure why, but it started after his mom, my mother-in-law, passed away. Maybe that has something to do with what happened to me. I don't know. Anyway, let me tell it from the beginning. Like I said, I live with my daughter, Emma, who's 8. One evening I came home from work, exhausted. Emma was at the table doing her homework, same as usual. I tossed my bag on the shelf in the entryway, dragged myself to the bedroom to change, and then headed to the kitchen to heat up some leftover soup. I was starving. Just a few minutes after I finished eating, there was a knock at the door. Strange, I wasn't expecting anyone. It was around 8 p.m., so maybe a neighbor. I looked through the peephole but saw nothing, just an empty hallway and a flickering light bulb in the corner that hadn't been replaced in years. God, where do I even live? Why was I cursed to be stuck in this dump? My mood was already terrible, and I thought, probably just some neighborhood kids messing around. I went back to the living room to watch TV. But as soon as I grabbed the remote, I heard the knocking again. I looked through the peephole once more, still no one there. I opened the door and scanned the hallway. Nothing. What kind of sick joke was this? Or maybe I was just hearing things. No, I definitely heard the knocking. I went back to the living room, laid down on the couch, turned on the TV, and dove into my shows. It was the only thing that helped me escape from the monotony of my life. About 15 minutes later, there was another knock. Seriously? Who has nothing better to do at this hour? Emma, go see who's knocking, I said. She walked into my room with a confused look on her face and said, Mom, no one's knocking. What? Okay, maybe working 2 shifts is starting to mess with my head. I wrapped my little girl in a blanket, and we sat together watching TV. About an hour later, I could barely keep my eyes open. I put Emma to bed in my room, told her a bedtime story, and lay down next to her. But the sleep didn't last long. I was jolted awake by a loud slam, like the door had been thrown open, like someone had come in or gone out. John used to come home from work late at night, so at first I didn't think much of it. But then, 5 seconds later, it hit me like a ton of bricks. John's gone. He's dead. Who slammed the door? What kind of nightmare was this? I threw on my robe and hurried to the entryway. The door was wide open, but I was certain I had locked it before bed. I always lock it with 2 bolts. And yet, not only was it unlocked, it was swung open as if someone had forced their way in. That's when fear started creeping in, like little needles prickling every inch of my skin. I quickly shut the door, locked it again, and tucked Emma back into bed. Then I lay down next to her, but I didn't sleep a wink after that. What just happened? I'm not superstitious. I don't believe in anything, no God, no devil, no ghosts, nothing. But this was unsettling, to say the least. Finally, around 7 a.m., exhaustion took over, and I drifted off. It was Saturday, so Emma didn't have school, and I didn't have work. But for some reason, I woke up way too early. I'd only slept for 2 hours, and a crushing sense of fatigue hung over me. It felt like I'd spent the whole night unloading freight trains. I didn't want to get up at all, but at the same time, I wasn't particularly sleepy either. It was such a strange feeling. But I had to get up, no matter how I felt. I needed to make breakfast and feed my kid. Dragging myself out of bed and throwing on my robe, I shuffled to the kitchen. The first thing I noticed was a cup sitting in the middle of the kitchen table. You might think, so what? It's just a cup, but no. It wasn't just any cup. It was my late husband's cup. Here's the thing, I had thrown away all of his belongings, every last one of them. I didn't want to think about him anymore or be reminded of him. I was trying to move on, to start fresh. So how on earth did this cup get here? What was going on? Now, I was genuinely scared. Goosebumps covered my whole body. I grabbed a cigarette, sat down at the table, and lit up. A million thoughts raced through my mind, but nothing made sense. I snapped out of my daze when the cigarette burned down and singed my finger. I'd completely forgotten why I came into the kitchen in the first place. I tossed the cup in the trash and started making breakfast. The rest of the day was full of household chores, cleaning, laundry, cooking. That strange incident slipped from my mind as I got busy with everything, but the exhaustion never left me. Now I was blaming it on running around the house all day, wiping dust and cleaning up clutter. Emma spent most of the day playing outside. She came home just in time for dinner. We ate, and I gave her my phone so she could watch something on YouTube. Meanwhile, I collapsed on my favorite couch and dozed off. It was around 8 or 9 p.m. But again, my nap didn't last long. Maybe an hour and a half tops. I woke up feeling incredibly thirsty. Half asleep, I made my way to the kitchen. Emma was still glued to her phone. I filled a cup with water and took a couple of sips. That's when I realized with absolute horror that it was the cup. What the hell is going on here? This is not funny anymore. But I threw that cup out this morning. Slowly, a thought crept into my mind: either something paranormal is happening in this apartment, or I'm losing my mind. Leaving the cup on the table, I tucked Emma into bed and headed to my room. My head was spinning. First the door, now the cup. This was insane. And the exhaustion, it wasn't normal. Was I sick? I checked my temperature, and it was fine. With all these thoughts swirling around, I somehow managed to fall asleep. Surprisingly, I slept well, and nothing strange happened during the night. But it all started again the next morning. The front door was wide open. Again. And that wasn't all. More of my late husband's things began appearing in the apartment. His sneakers were on the shoe rack, his jacket was hanging in the closet, and that same cup was back in the kitchen. What the hell is going on? This is not some kind of prank, it's terrifying. Later that evening, Emma came down with a fever. She was pale as a ghost and didn't eat a thing. To be fair, neither did I. Something unexplainable was happening in this apartment. Her temperature spiked to 102 deg. I called an ambulance, and we went to the hospital. I spent the night there with her. The next morning, I went home to cook something for Emma. The food at the hospital barely qualified as food, and I wanted to make sure she had something decent to eat. On my way back home, I passed by a small church, and for some reason the idea of going inside crossed my mind. I'll say it again, I'm not someone who believes in this sort of thing. But after everything that had happened, I decided to go in. I spoke with the priest and told him about everything going on in the apartment. We agreed that he would come by the next day to bless the place. I gave him my address, feeling a bit more at peace, and headed home. When I got back to the apartment, everything seemed normal, nothing out of place. The exhaustion, however, still lingered. It would fluctuate, sometimes easing, sometimes intensifying, but it never fully went away. And I realized something strange: it seemed to get worse when I was inside the apartment. Just one more odd thing to add to the list. And for some reason I had a terrible feeling about that night. I didn't know why, but the dread was real. I managed to cook some food for Emma, got dressed, and headed out the door. Outside, my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, was standing by the entrance. She's a sweet old lady who lives just below us. "Susan, come here. I need to tell you something," she said. "Hello, Mrs. Jenkins," I greeted her. "What's going on, Susan? I know I'm old and don't sleep well as it is, but could you stop running around at night? I know you have a child and all, but the ceiling is thin and I can hear everything. I haven't been able to sleep at all." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "No one's been running around. People sleep at night. And Emma's been in the hospital. Maybe it wasn't you slamming the door." Then she added, with a strange look on her face, like she knew something but didn't want to say it. I didn't respond. I just turned around and left. Damn it, this is real. It's not just me, she heard it too. So who's been running or slamming doors at night? We were at the hospital. With that question swirling in my mind, I made my way back to Emma. When I got to the hospital and saw the doctor, I was shocked. He told me that Emma was fine, completely healthy, and I could take her home. A wave of relief washed over me. Emma ran out of the room and hugged me tightly. About half an hour later, we were already on our way home. The moment our building came into view, my mind was once again filled with thoughts of dark, eerie things. All those strange occurrences kept replaying in my head. Remembering what my neighbor had said, I decided to stop by the church again. The priest was just about to head home, but I pleaded with him to come by today, not tomorrow. My gut feeling had only gotten worse with every step I took towards our apartment. You might think, why didn't she just move out for a while, but where would we go? It's just me and Emma, there's no one else. We have nowhere to go. The priest agreed, and the three of us made our way up the stairs to our apartment. The moment we stepped inside, I noticed the change in his expression. His face grew pale, and he quickly pulled out his holy items. He recited prayers, sprinkled holy water around, and hurried out of there as fast as he could. His last words chilled me. You need to leave this place. There's evil here, and it can't be driven out easily. Did you think it was your late husband visiting you? I'm afraid it's not. Something else is here, something terrifying and unexplainable, feeding off your fear and draining your energy. I've done what I can. I hope it helps. I closed the door behind him and dragged myself to the kitchen. I lit a cigarette, buried my face in my hands, and tried to make sense of it all. What the hell just happened? Evil. What evil? But as I thought more about it, it all started to make sense. The priest said it was feeding off my fear and my life energy. That explained the constant exhaustion, and my deepest fear was the memory of my husband. I was terrified of thinking about him, and then his things started reappearing in the house. Chills ran down my spine, and my heart started racing. Leave. Where would we go? We had no money, no one to turn to. Go out into the streets. And on top of that, Emma was just starting to recover from her fever. It was already freezing outside. Winter was coming. There was no choice but to spend the night in that apartment. After dinner, I put Emma to bed, took a shower, unfolded the couch, and lay down. My eyes were heavy, and I fell asleep almost immediately. Then, around 2 a.m., something happened that is forever burned into my memory as the most terrifying experience of my 35 years. Emma woke me up. She had gotten up to use the bathroom, and do you know what she asked me? How she woke me up. Mama, who's sleeping next to you? Any trace of sleep vanished instantly, and I felt that someone was lying right next to me. The terror that shot through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. My entire body began to shake uncontrollably. Something was on my bed right beside me. In the mirror on the nightstand, I caught a glimpse of it. It was a figure. Its face had human-like features, but it was deathly pale, almost white, with pitch-black eyes and mouth. It had wrapped itself in the blanket and was lying there, right next to me. What the hell was that? Panic seized me. I slowly, quietly got up from the bed. The thing didn't move. It just lay there. I quickly dressed, grabbed Emma, and just as silently we left the apartment. It didn't seem to notice us, or maybe it let us go on purpose. I have no idea. I was trembling and Emma was crying. We had no idea what to do or where to go. As we stepped outside, I looked up at the apartment window. And there it was. That thing, staring right at me through the kitchen window. Its eyes locked onto mine, and the sheer terror of it, I can't even put into words. I made a decision right then and there. I would ask Mrs. Henderson for help. After knocking on her door for a solid 10 minutes, she finally opened, her face still sleepy but welcoming us in. I explained everything that had just happened. She's a devout woman, and thankfully she believed us and let us stay with her for the time being. I knew I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I decided I'd sell it. Whatever that thing was, I have no idea. Life at Mrs. Henderson's place started to fall back into a routine. Things seemed normal again. Emma went back to school, and I returned to work. Everything felt okay, that is, until one night when I heard it again. A knock on the front door, followed by the sound of it slamming shut.